Welcome to the Two Togs Talk podcast, where two photographers with hundreds of weddings worth of experience give you meaningful insights into what works and what doesn't, reveal juicy wedding nightmares from actual weddings, and what you can do to make your wedding day more magical. He's Garrett, the old pro, who still cries at daddy-daughter dances and who definitely steals an extra cupcake on his way out.
She's Gianna, the young gun, who's always got the extra safety pin or granola bar handy and who is currently planning her own wedding. Together, we can help make your biggest day more memorable, more relaxed, and more personal to you and your vision. Welcome, friends, back to another episode of the Two Togs Talk. 10 episodes in, and I still can't say our own name. Awesome. Welcome. Hey, today we are going to approach this from the perspective of if your wedding photographer planned your wedding. So we've got some insights. We've seen a bunch of stuff, and we want to show you and talk about some different things that we run into on a weekly basis. We have an expert actually in the room as we speak because we have an actual photographer who's actually planning her wedding as we speak. So maybe we can dive into some of that content or some of those insights as we go through here. But obviously, there's lots of pieces that go into your day, and if the photographer had their way on it, they would build it a specific way or have you do specific things on your day. One of the things that we hear about from our clients or from lots of people actually is the fact that photography is the thing that travels the furthest past the wedding, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got all these things that go into the actual day itself, but the photo and the video is the thing that travels the furthest with you. So giving precedent to that, giving time and energy to that is important if you want the quality of product to come out the way you want it to. So in this list of things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to kind of give you some things to think about and some ways to put all that stuff together so that the quality of product from your photographer's perspective is as best as it can be. So,
yeah. So basically, I guess might as well start off with a timeline because that is what your day revolves around is your timeline. And if you don't schedule in the time for those photos and you just expect them to be taken as your day progresses, I mean, it would work that way, but you're not going to end up with the quality or quantity of work that you're probably expecting from your wedding images.
Apparently, we think timeline is a big thing because this whole podcast started with an episode about how a wedding timeline should be laid out. A lot of times your photographer is the one that if you don't have a wedding planner or if you don't have somebody that's kind of putting all that stuff together for you, usually your photographer is the one that helps you build that, or at least we do, so that we can kind of build these things in as we go. But yes, having your timeline laid out properly gives you the best possible way to get all the things that you want, right? We use kind of, in my head as I go through a wedding day, I know what I'm supposed to be shooting at different parts of the day, and it's based on how the schedule goes, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that at the beginning I'm usually focusing on details, and then I start to do the getting ready process, and I can kind of tell you by where we're at in the day what I've already photographed, what I still need to photograph. Mm-hmm. That's obviously based on you following the schedule, and if that gets out of whack, and that's another thing that we can maybe talk about is when you make a schedule, make it and stay to it as best you can. I don't want it to feel like it's such a structured day, but there are times where it's like, hey, yeah, we got to get this thing done. This is the opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the main pieces, I mean, if your photographer is not the one that's helping you, we hear a lot of people going straight to the internet, searching up wedding day timelines and just going for it off of that. But that doesn't always work because for one, your sunset's probably going to be a little bit different than the internet says it is, and your ceremony time might be different. And those are usually kind of coincided based on each other. If you have a late sunset, you could have a later ceremony. But if your sunset's at 5 o'clock, your ceremony is probably going to be a little bit earlier. And kind of structuring your day around those two main pieces is pretty much where I would start if you're building your own schedule. And if you want to hear a whole bunch about planning it, go back to our first episode.
For sure. Yeah, and the crazy thing in Montana especially is that, we start our season and the sunset, is pretty late. by the time we get to June, I mean, the sun's not going down till 9:30, almost 10 o'clock, right? And then if we continue our season all the way into October, which we do most years, or even December, the sunset is happening at like 5:30.
Yes.
That's a huge discrepancy, and that's a huge difference in time frame, and how you lay that out matters, right? And so making sure that you give the appropriate amount of time to these things. The one thing that I thought about more as I've gotten older with this is I've heard comments, and not necessarily from like our people, but on the internet and things, talking about how they feel like their wedding day feels just like it's like a big photo shoot, right?
Yeah.
I can see how that happens, right? I can see how, the photographer or the video creation process takes over the day, and everything that we do is revolving around that. And, from a photographer's perspective, I mean, would love that, right?
Yeah.
Would love the ability to create imagery all the way through and be able to pull you in and out and do all that stuff. But I also understand that this day is more than just us. This day is more than just us, trying to document what's happening. And sometimes you just got to let it happen, right? So making sure that you have the appropriate amount of, yes, I want to value my photos. I want to give my photos time to do what they need to do, but I also don't want to, shortchange the people that have maybe traveled long distances to come in and hang out with us, or, spend more time than that. I mean, like, live in the moment at some of this stuff too, right? Don't stage it. Don't put it together just based on what the photo schedule should say, right?
Exactly. And you have the ability to control this schedule. So add in times for the things that you want. If you want that private time, and maybe it's 30 minutes, like maybe it's 5 minutes, but schedule in the time for you and your spouse to have alone time. Schedule in time if you want it for your family. Like, you have the say in how this day goes. So build it how you want it to be. Like, yes, take into consideration those times where sunset photos are going to happen, family photos are going to happen, but also use your creativity to build it how you want it. And I feel like a lot of people think that there is a specific structure that has to be. And yes, there's parts that are like that, but there's a lot more flexibility than I think most people think with a schedule.
We've said this from day one on this podcast. The best weddings that we deal with are the ones that make them unique and make them their own. Yes, from a schedules perspective, it's kind of nice to stay in the same rhythm with it all, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of ways to put it together.
And based off of this, I mean, I'm kind of jumping around here, but one of the things we've seen a little bit more recently, and I guess we haven't technically done, but this is something that I'm planning on doing. And this is if you're wanting to spend more time with your family, but you still want those awesome couples photos, you can schedule a session outside of your wedding. Like, get dressed up again, go back out. I'm pretty sure most photographers would be willing to do something like that. Just have a day after session or a week after session, whenever you want to do it. It's a way where you can then spend the whole evening with your guests, and you don't have to worry about running away and catching the sunset at the perfect time.
Your photographer would probably love that too.
Yeah.
I know your photographer is going to love it, because it gives us more time to be creative and more time to marinate with what's going on. Marinate, I think is how you said that, not marinade. Anyway,
Either way.
you get more time to be in the moment and kind of work through things. When sunset photos can be kind of stressful depending on what you're trying to do with it. Trying to keep that balance of, hey, we need to get these photos, but hey, I know you got a bunch of people that are ready to party with you.
Yeah.
Right. So giving that time to really slow into all that stuff, and being able to take our time and wait for the sunset to actually happen, and not, okay, cool, we got it.
Then you walk back and the beautiful sunset happens.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been walking back, or just got the couple back into the dance floor, and now they're ready to go for it, and I'm watching the sunset outside go, which is awesome. Gross.
Yes.
So I think that's a great idea. All right. Any way that we can use photo to enhance the day, and maybe that's by giving you time to do the things that you want to do on your day, right? I've always kind of felt bad as you pull people out of that, when they have family members and friends that have come from such long distances a lot of times, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I feel like we hear from a lot of our couples like, oh, well, we're okay. We've gotten some couples photos earlier on. Like, we don't care to go back out. And like, obviously, maybe that is the thing. They're not a huge fan of sunset photos or something like that. But I think a lot of it is that pull, like, wow, my whole family's here. I don't want to spend the entire evening out taking photos.
Right.
So don't. Just do them later.
So don't.
Yeah.
You're the boss.
Exactly.
Make the decision. Okay, so another thing that we see a lot as photographers, and if we have conversations in the back a lot of times of like, dude, if I were to set this up, picking your ceremony location is very important, right? And some venues have kind of predetermined places where they put you, and that's just what you get, and that's fine. Some places give you a little bit more flexibility in how you put that together. If you have the option to pick your location, we recommend that you always put the sun behind you, right?
Yep.
A lot of times what happens in a scenario is, I'm thinking of a couple different places here in town that we shoot all the time. When you've got your bridal party and your bride and groom at the altar, usually what happens is one of them is looking into the sun and one of them is looking away from the sun, right? So you got a shadowy figure and you've got a really bright lit figure. The hard part with that is cameras physically can't handle both of those at the same time. So when we edit these things, we have to do a little, magic in terms of bringing highlights down and shadows up and all that kind of stuff. But if you were to simply put the sun at your back, right? So basically your guests would be looking into the sun if the sun was super low. But basically what's happening is then you're evenly lighting all of your bridal party, yourself, your groom, the groom and the bride all together, and they're all on the shadowy side. So then I can expose my images properly, right? All the way through that. I can then get more creative images out of all that stuff. And it's less, settings gymnastics on our side to try and get that to work right. Not only that, I mean, I think of a couple of the places I know that the girls are always out there and they're staring into the sun and they've got this like squinty face thing happening the whole time. Just like,
Or if it's the groomsmen, they always were like, oh, well, can we just wear our sunglasses?
Right.
Oh, please no.
The answer is no.
Please don't wear sunglasses.
So, and all that would take is literally just rotating your ceremony's location 45 degrees to one direction or the other, right? So that you have the sun behind what's happening there. Again, sometimes that's possible. Sometimes the venues themselves have, this is our location. We have a built-in altar, or we have a walkway that takes you right to this thing. But if we can put the effort into, choosing that properly, it's going to make your images way better. Yes, I'm sorry, your guests might have to look into the sun, but nobody really cares if they have their sunglasses on, or if they have a hat, or if they're using their program as a visor, whatever. So from a photos perspective, it's amazing if we can get things symmetrically lit, where it's even, instead of one side being really bright, one side being really dark. So
yes. Another big ticket item from our side is your vendors need a seat to sit at. I could count so many times where at a wedding we end up scrunched up in a corner or sitting on the floor trying to eat our dinner quickly to get to the next thing. It's simple. Just add another table in the back, put them in a corner, wherever you want to put them. That's great. But if you just give them a table and chairs, they will thank you a million times over, because we need a seat too.
Yeah, I'm cool.
We'd like a table to eat dinner at.
I'm cool being in the corner. I'm cool being in the closet. I don't really care. As long as it's got a chair, man, we are good to go. Right. Yeah, you're right. There's just so many things there. And typically your vendors, I don't know, there's some of them are there throughout the entire process. Some of them aren't. I'm thinking of, by the time we get to dinner, it's usually the DJs. It's usually a planner if we've got one. It's, maybe the caterers. The caterers are kind of doing their job at that point. So they kind of just do their thing. But yeah, any of the vendors that have been there for a while, like your videographer, your photographer, your DJs, would love a place to just rest for 5 minutes. Right. So having a table, having a dedicated space for them, would be awesome.
Yes.
Please.
Please and thank you.
Please think of us like, please think of us like friends and like humans, instead of like vendors and
animals. Eat in the corner,
Yeah.
on the floor,
Here's
no
your
fork. Oh yeah, forks, another thing.
Scraps.
Please have some extra forks laying
Yeah,
around.
seriously, because that's one of the reasons, right? So you don't, or one of the byproducts of that is, if I have a seat, I typically have a table setting, right, as well. So I'm not diving around trying to find a fork in the back, or reusing the one that was in my truck all
bring
week.
Bring our own forks now.
Seriously, put it in the emergency kit.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
So yeah, anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, that one's pretty simple. The next one is kind of back and forth. I personally have been leaning more towards I love when the couple does their first dance right after walking in the door. Number one, because it splits up the huge chunk of dances. Typically after dinner, after toasts is when people start going into their first dances, mother-daughter dance or father-daughter dance, mother-son dance. And that's a lot of dancing for your guests to just sit and watch. So it's kind of fun to split that up. People have a little bit more energy when you've just walked in.
You probably got everybody's attention at that point, right? So they're all paying attention to you.
Yes, exactly. And if you're going to do the super cool, awesome thing that we tell everyone to do of playing your engagement story video, it's a great way to do that. We just shot a wedding in December that did this with their engagement story played. They walked in and they danced and everyone loved it. All of their guests raved about it. Just absolutely had the best time.
So a little backstory on what an engagement story video is. So we, for this couple, we created a video where we had them come into the studio and we interviewed them individually, kind of like they were, being interviewed by the CIA or something.
Yeah.
And said, hey, okay, so tell me the story. Tell me how you guys met. Tell me what was your first date. When did you know she was the one? And then tell us about how you proposed, how that whole process went. And then we usually end it with like, what are you most excited about for the wedding? What do you, what are you looking forward to? What's going to be really awesome with this whole thing? We can send us put a couple links in the show notes here, maybe to a couple of these that we've seen there that we've done. But basically, and then we interview you both separately, and then we tie these things together and in it with an interview, and they've got some footage from your engagement shoot and some other stuff that we've done. So they turn out really awesome. It's a great way to tell the backstory of like how we got to this.
Yes.
Like a lot of your guests at a wedding will know either one or the other, right? They'll know the bride really well or not maybe the groom as much or vice versa. And so having this video that shows them, kind of this whole process and how we got to here was really cool. This one specifically, we actually filmed the end of the video was during their shoot that we shot all this video for them. We went to the venue and we had them walking up to the door that they would then be walking through as the end of the video played. So this whole video ended with them walking up to the door, and then it went fade to black, and then all of a sudden they walk in the door and the whole place went nuts. It was awesome.
Yes.
It was super awesome. And then what they did is they just transitioned right from there. They went right to the front. We had told the story in this video about the song, why they chose their first dance song was basically on their first date. He had made a comment. They were in a car. They listened to a song and they said, if we ever get married, this is the song we're going to dance to. Like just kind of offhandedly. Well, here we are 5 years later, they're getting married. And so that was the song that played. So that whole video kind of tied that all together. They understood the moment a little bit more.
Yes.
And it was such a cool, like we got lots of compliments and we had lots of people like, oh my gosh, that was incredible. So it kind of kept that whole flow going. It just added this extra level of connection, of just fun to the whole process. Right. So
yeah, I think that was definitely, and it's unique too. I feel like most people don't do that. That was truly one of the first weddings we have seen do that. But yeah, ask your photographers if they would do something like that, or your videographer. I think a lot of videographers probably offer something similar to that. So just add that in there, and it's a fun touch. And
or call
then
us.
grandma gets the full story and doesn't have to ask you a million questions. Oh, how did you guys meet? And yes,
right.
It's a great way to share that story.
For sure. Okay, so as you're probably already noticing, there's no rhyme or reason as to the order at which we're throwing all these tips to you today. We're just kind of randomly spewing out things that we think are important. The next thing we're going to talk about is the family photos, right? And we've got an entire...
We've said it once, we'll say it again.
We're going to say this every episode, I think. We're going to smack people across the face with this. The idea here is family photos are super important in your wedding day, right? And that's usually one of the biggest draws. Like, hey, we want to make sure we get family photos throughout the day. But then there's also, I feel like the family photo section of the day is also one of the most stressful parts of the day, right?
Yeah.
Just in terms of trying to get everybody organized and trying to keep everybody from running away. So we've done a whole episode in this podcast talking about family photos, or I think we've talked about this in several different options here, but a couple of things that would make this way more efficient in our perspective. Number one, make sure that you're doing them after the ceremony. Yes, I said after. Don't try to do them before the ceremony. Here's why. Everybody kind of knows where the ceremony start location is, right? So they're going to be there at 4:00, and then even if they're a couple minutes late, like whatever, they're there. We're good. We're going through this whole process. If you decide that you want to do these beforehand, and we say, okay, all the family needs to meet there at 3:30, what happens? Well, somebody's running late. Somebody forgot their tie. Somebody, there's a baby that needs a diaper change. There's just all these pieces of the puzzle that just kind of unravel for you. And then, this person who is in several of these combinations of photos isn't in them. And so we have to restart anyway, right? So what do? We have to do them all after the ceremony anyway. So we have lots of couples that ask us, hey, can we do the family photos beforehand just to try to get that part of it done? And I say, we've tried that. It just doesn't work as efficiently. Here's what I would recommend. Number one, let's do them right after the ceremony. We call it, we've got them at the ceremony. We call it keeping them in the cage, right? So we've got all these people there. The idea is that the bridal party, the bride and the groom will walk out, the bridal party will come out. And then at that point, we kind of just start, hey, are you part of the family? Stay put. Hey, are you part of the family? Don't move. So we've got all these people there. If we have everybody in the one location, we can make this process super efficient. If we have to then, if we let everybody out of the cage, if everybody just kind of disbands and runs away, and then we have to go find everybody again, that's a nightmare.
Yes.
There are several, we've got people running around trying to get everybody organized. We've got the DJ making announcements that nobody's listening to. We're trying to get this whole thing put together, and it's the proverbial herding of cats.
Yes.
Right. So by doing them after the ceremony, everybody's there, everybody's ready to go. The second thing that we do is we create a list of our combinations of photos that we want to do prior to the wedding day. If you're sitting there trying to do this in the moment,
it's awful. I mean, we've had brides forget to fill theirs out and had to show up and come up with them on the spot. And your family, yes. You know who you want in your photos for the most part, yes. But you're going to end up missing some combinations. People are going to get frustrated because you're trying to run around and get these people organized because you probably haven't told them prior to the wedding day that they're in these photos. And then they're going to be annoyed because they didn't know that they were supposed to be in the photos. And it just turns into a complete mess.
If you've got a list, it turns into a couple things. Number one is a checklist to make sure I don't forget anybody, right? And that's important because 3 days from now you'll go, oh God, I forgot to have a photo with this person. If you're trying to do it in the moment, you're gonna forget somebody and you're gonna be disappointed down the road, right? The other thing that it does is it gives me the ability to defend myself when aunt whoever and third cousin whatever comes in and says, hey, did you think about this combination? We haven't done this one yet. And I'm like, hey, lady, it's on the list. Like, we're going through this. We're going to get it. I promise we're going to do it. If it's not on the list, once I get through the list, I'm all ears, man. We can do all the different combinations that you want. And there's sometimes where that happens where maybe somebody showed up that they weren't expecting to be there, or maybe there was a different combination. Maybe it's a bunch of mom's friends are there and we want to get a couple of those, whatever that is. But if you don't walk in organized to that process, you are going to get eaten alive by everybody having an opinion. Hey, we need to do this one. Oh, but did we do that one? I think we did, but maybe not. I can't remember. It just turns into this big messy.
And then as the bride, you get upset because you feel like it's taking forever and people aren't listening, and it just
Right.
So be prepared. Come with a list. Go through the list, and then have fun after that.
For sure. Yes. And understand, if you come in with the list and you have everybody present, man, this thing can go pretty efficiently. We can get through a huge combination of people in a short amount of time. We actually build our lists, and we've structured our list based on, like the flow of people in and people out.
Yep.
So it's not just here's a random bunch of people. Okay, now we're going to take all those people out. We're going to bring a whole nother set of people in, but then we're going to bring half of the first group. Like, we try to think about who's coming in, who's coming out. And so it's a really efficient kind of people in, people out thing.
Making sure that older people aren't standing out in the sun. The grandparents get done first, and then you get to send them inside.
Yep.
And then release people as you get through those photos, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
End up with just a small chunk left at the end.
And so that's if you want to do all the way down to aunts, uncles, cousins. I mean, that we can do that very efficiently as well. If it's just going to be immediate family, parents, siblings, grandparents, like that's no problem either. We can work through that. But anyway, coming in prepared. Doing them after the ceremony, coming in with a list is going to make your life significantly easier. If you need more notes on this, listen to any of our other podcasts, and you will hear us talk about this in
pretty much every
full
one.
detail, right? So anyway, it's that important, because it's the whole list, and I've said this before on here. The list that we have made it stemmed from my own wedding. My wife and I didn't make a list like this. We got some decent photos of, kind of our traditional family members, our parents and our siblings and that kind of stuff. But we didn't get anything with grandparents. We didn't get anything with any of the aunts and uncles that showed up.
Mm-hmm.
We both have grandparents that aren't around anymore, right? So it's like, man, that here we are, almost 13 years later, and my wife still is, upset about that, right?
Yeah.
So, don't be upset about that in 13 years. Just
yeah.
make a list.
Just do it right the first time.
Right. The next thing we want to talk about here is choosing your vendors. And yes, you've heard us talk about this before. And yes, this is definitely a hill we will die on, because we want to make sure that this we get this across. Our opinion, right? And again, this is our opinion, but I think that wedding vendors need to be chosen based on their style and their personality before the price tag comes into the conversation, right? I'm not saying that price is not an important part of the conversation, but I'm saying that price shouldn't be the first piece of the puzzle that you use to gauge your wedding vendors, right?
Yeah, and a lot of the wedding vendors, I'd say it's about 50-50. Some people do have their pricing on their website and others don't. And that could be a part of the reason is maybe they don't want people choosing based on their price tag. But at the same time, it is still an important piece where obviously the client needs to know that, because if it's $10,000 and they were only planning on $5,000, it's not something that they're going to go for.
Right. As a vendor, so here's the thing. Maybe price is the first conversation that you have to get in the door, and then you make sure that they're a quality fit after that. But find your
like a happy medium,
your price point, right? And then kind of go from there. We have decided to put our pricing on our website because I think it makes it more efficient, right? So you've just been going through this process.
Yes.
You're planning your wedding right now. Talk to me, are you turned off by a wedding vendor and their website that doesn't have pricing involved with it?
I would say yes, for the most part, because while pricing is not the entire conversation, it is a big point, and I don't want to go travel down this road and get a week into trying to figure this out just to get a price estimate. And that's what just went through. I was looking at transportation. I had a couple different ones in my mind and it didn't have a price tag. But in order to get even just an estimate, it was, you had to give us all this information. You have to put in your email. You have to do this and that and this and that. And then it was just like an automated email response of, oh, because you put in X, Y, and Z, here's your estimated price. And it was very impersonal for one, and just not kind of something that I would want to go off of. So I ended up just trying to find someone else that had that more personable. And then that's kind of even where the personality comes in prior to the initial conversation. If you don't have any information about who you are on your website, if you don't have any information about what you offer, it's really difficult for a client to come through and see something that they like and then pursue it.
Here's a side question. How responsive are your vendors or these people that you're reaching out to? Are you getting responses based on the eye roll that I just got? I'm assuming it's probably not as quickly as you were hoping for, but
no.
What's the time frame? What's the turnaround that you're finding here?
I'd say it's very, it's one side or the other. They're either very, very responsive. They'll get back to you immediately within a couple of days. My venue, very responsive, very friendly, immediately wanting to help, asking questions. And then there's other vendors, which I won't name in specifics because we do live in this town, just never responded to me. Truly, there are some that I looked at their website. They said that they had my date available on their website. I've sent emails and have absolutely no response. So it's making me want to obviously go a different direction, not getting that initial response.
That's a big tell though. If somebody's not going to take your days seriously when it comes in as an inquiry, you're not going to feel like you're being taken seriously at any part of the process, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to be, you send the email and 45 seconds later you get a response.
Yeah, no. I would say probably a couple days to a week would still be reasonable. For at least just an initial inquiry. For every response, I'm not expecting that, but if I were to question and be like, hey, I have a wedding on September 6th. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z, and here are some of the options I was thinking about. Could you give me some more information? I mean, if you're not responding to me within a week or two, I'm going to move on and find someone else that will respond. So
we try to get to people, and at least my goal is to get to people within, at the latest 48 hours, hopefully within 24 hours of them getting to us.
I mean, for the most part, every one of these vendors is on their email every day.
Right.
Like,
well, and it kind of depends on where when do I get this email? Do I get this inquiry on a Saturday morning? When we don't come back into work until Mondays, and I'm one of those staunchy, like, no, I'm going to defend my weekend if I have it off, and even if I'm working, at a wedding or whatever, I'm not going to respond to emails until I come back into the office on Monday. So there's a little bit of that, but I'm always amazed at people's responses, like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for calling me back.
Yeah,
and thank you so much for the email." I'm like,
I could be a little biased.
Are you not getting that elsewhere, or what's the deal here?
But yeah, and maybe that is just like my internal bias, because that's how we have traditionally done this: is email back as soon as we can, because we don't want people to be sitting in la la land waiting for a response. But surprisingly, I found a lot of vendors don't respond very quickly. And maybe that's because I reached out so far in advance. But at the same time, at least a response would be nice. Yeah. Like,
it's crazy. And I wonder how many, and I mean, there are lots of full-time vendors, right? There are lots of people that are doing this full-time, but there's also a lot of part-time vendors, right?
That's true.
A lot of people that are doing, other jobs, and then this is kind of their side hustle in the summertime or whatever. And maybe that has, I don't know, I'm speaking on other people's behalf. Our goal is to get back to you as quickly as we can, right? Because I think that's important. That shows you that personality, that shows you that style. When you come to us in the middle of something, in the middle of your process, like, we're here to help, and we're here to help in a timely fashion. We're not going to just leave you hanging until you get to the end and be like, oh, actually, so sorry, we didn't get that all organized.
Yeah. A side note to that is, in your initial inquiry, please provide information. Like, we've had several emails come in.
Preach it, sister. Preach it.
Yes. We've had several emails where people just say, hey, I'm looking for wedding pricing. Okay, cool. Great. Love it. Happy to help. For one, ours is on our website, so you obviously haven't checked it out. But if you've gone through a lot of other vendors and seen that not everyone has it on their website, I do understand just like trying to reach out to everybody. But in your initial inquiry, you should have, number one, your contact information, and maybe number one above that, your wedding date.
For sure.
Please don't get down the road asking all these questions, getting to know them, getting all excited, wanting them as your vendor, and then be like, oh, by the way, this is my wedding date, and then they don't have that available. So
that's usually one of the very first questions I ask, and unfortunately, I'm not trying to sound like I'm just trying to get right down to the point here, but this is exactly what's happening here. Is I'm going, oh, am I available that date? If I'm not, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I really appreciate you guys looking into us. Just not available, right? And
yeah, and it's, if you're not doing that, you're wasting both of your time. Like, it's not worth the time and energy to go down that road if they're not available to begin with. So your first inquiry, number one, your wedding date. Number two, your contact information. And number three, maybe just like the information you're looking for. Don't just be like, wanting information. Like,
the more specific information you can give, the better, right? Like, I think from the beginning, if you can give us as much information as you can right at the very beginning, that helps us cross off so many emails back and forth, so much time, trying to get to the bottom of what you're actually looking for. We've got several different offerings, several different packages, and several different ways that we put this thing together. And if you come into this conversation even in your initial inquiry saying, hey, here's what I'm looking for. Here's my date. We would love a photographer to be there all day. We would love, like whatever, specifics that you're trying to get out of us. Oh my gosh, that helps us get to this. Okay, cool. Here's what we can do. Here's how we can put this together for you. That crosses so many back and forth emails that typically take, there's been times where it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get this whole process done. And it's like, oh my gosh, all it would have taken is a little bit of information at the beginning, right? So be as upfront as you can.
And the more detailed you are, the easier it is for that vendor to give you a reasonable price range for what that would be. If you're saying, oh, I want a photographer for this day, and you're not saying, oh, I want a full day or a half day or XYZ, they're going to be like, well, we can do that. Here's our range of prices, because it obviously differs for whichever package. And a lot of vendors have similar ways of doing things, whether they have a couple different packages. DJs probably offer a couple. There's just put some information in there.
I've said this once. I've said this a million times. I think that 95% of the world's problems are caused by lack of communication, right? Like
Yes.
better communication would solve 95% of the world's problems.
Yes.
So give us as much information as you can about what you're trying to do there. So,
okay. So the next thing, not a huge piece, but definitely a piece that from a photographer's perspective is part of the decisions, I guess, at least in my mind, is a getting ready location. A lot of venues do offer spaces for bridal party getting ready, groomsmen getting ready, and that's awesome. But when you're looking at those, just kind of take into consideration what they look like. Is it a dark dungeon or a messy Airbnb or wherever it's going to be? Just think about if you're wanting the photos in there, your getting ready photos, that all of that stuff that's the mess is going to be in the photos too.
Just generally speaking, from a photographer's perspective, anything that has more light to it is going to be a better shooting location, right? So if you can find spaces that have more light, that have natural light, that have lots of extra space, those are the places that we're going to love to be involved with. Yes, we understand that a wedding has a logistical center, right? When you and your bridesmaids all walk in and you're carrying 3 or 4 bags a piece, and then it turns into this big mess of hairspray and sticky bras and fruit trays and whatever else is in there. Like there are certain places that it just has to happen. That's how it all works. That's how we get ready. But if that's also the place that you want to do the getting in the dress photos or having these sentimental moments with your parents or your grandparents or whatever, like, and you got a big fruit tray in the back or half a jar of used pickles and some mimosa ingredients, like it's not going to give us the same vibe, right? So
either put someone in charge of cleaning that space before the photos start, or find a space where, I mean, we've done this before where if that space is too small or it's dark, is just once you're ready for those photos, I mean, we can stage things outside of that spot by a window that has natural light, or outside, or in a different location that offers that better lighting. And so you can get those photos that you're actually wanting.
We are seeking the light as a photographer. Just know that that's what's happening as we go through there. So something that you can do to help your photographer out in that scenario, as far as being ready when we do the getting ready photos, make sure that you get all your details organized before the photographer arrives. We try to make a list, and we send this to our brides beforehand, so that when we walk in the door, like all of their stuff is sitting there. But if you can have all your details, like your dress, your shoes, your rings, your invitations, the perfume that you're wearing, the something borrowed, something blue, whatever it is, if you've made a decision about adding this thing to your wedding day, have it ready for us when we get there, and then we can do all these amazing, flat lays and cool things that show off all the pieces of that. I can't tell you how many times we've done this where we walk in, we say, hey, all your details. Okay, great. Yeah. Here's my shoes. Here's my things. Here's my flowers. Off we go. And then, cool. We go spend all of our time. We do that thing. We go get ready. Now we're walking down the aisle, and all of a sudden now there's a brand new piece of jewelry, or there's a brand new veil, or there's a brand new garter or something.
Yeah. Or there's this really important memento from grandma. And those things are important. Yes. When you see your Pinterest board of flat lays, it's traditionally shoes and invitations and perfume and maybe jewelry and rings. But there's a lot more to make that more personable to you. Like, yeah, your name's on the card, but what's important? Is it your mom's veil? Is it your dad's ring? Is it whatever it is?
Right.
Bring it. Don't leave it out.
Can't tell you how many times I've just gone, dope. Where was that an hour ago?
Right. So yes, make a list. I mean, your photographer probably has a list. Ask for that list and put it in a box the night before.
Yeah, know where it's at. Don't spread it all out. Some of it's in this box, some of it's over there, something like that. Just get it all organized, right?
Put it all in the shoebox.
For sure.
Pass it over when they get there.
Let's dive down the road of unplugged ceremonies, shall we? Yes. So this has been an existential shift in my mindset from the beginning. So yes. So what do we mean by an unplugged ceremony? If you've done this before, if you've been to a wedding in the last, 100 years, you probably have seen an unplugged ceremony. What do we mean by this? We mean by, removing the cell phones, the iPads, the electronics that would be taking photos of your ceremony while the ceremony is actually happening. The hesitation or the worry on this, and what happens a lot of times, how this affects your imagery, is when this person comes out of the woodwork with a camera, is aiming it down the aisle, is standing in front. I actually got cut off by a lady one time. I was out of position, first of all, but whatever. I was trying to make up for it by getting back to the end of the aisle to get the first kiss shot. Well, this lady stood up and had her little DSLR camera and was taking the picture from the back, right, like as I came around the corner, and she blocked me from being able to get this kiss. And I was like, oh God. Luckily they kissed a second time. So I was like, first kiss, there it was. But basically unplugging and letting people, be present in the moment and not have to worry about taking pictures. There are several ways that people try to approach this. I love the idea of an unplugged ceremony. I think that we as a society need to be more present in the things that we're doing anyway. But from a photographer's perspective, here's where I get with this. I don't mind if other people have cameras or things that they're taking pictures of. Sometimes, that's one of my favorite photos to sneak up on people with is I call it the photo of a photo, right? Or I call it the inception photo, where I'm taking a picture of somebody's screen that they're taking a cell phone shot with. And it's a lot of fun because you can kind of see what they're looking at and it kind of tells a part of the story. But where that becomes a problem is if it gets in the way of what we're trying to do, right? So, some people like to put signs at the back. I actually have a sign in the other room that says, we've hired a guy. His name is Garrett. He's here to take pictures. So please, be present with us. Don't, we're unplugging this ceremony. Here's what I know about signs.
Nobody reads them.
Nobody reads them.
Nobody follows them.
You should see the parking lot where my kids are in elementary school, where it has no parking signs all the way down this fence right next to the school. And every single day there's 100 cars parked there. Like, people don't read signs. They just don't, it just doesn't work. They don't care. It doesn't work. Right. So if you are truly trying to get people to put their devices away during the ceremony, here's a couple ways that I think that work way better. Number one, give them an opportunity to do it. Right. So at the beginning of it, say, hey, everybody just get your cell phones out. We're going to take 5 seconds. We're going to stand up here. We're going to smile at you, and you're going to take your cell phone photos, and you're just going to be awesome. And then we're going to put them away. And we're going to be done. Right.
Yeah.
If you don't give them an opportunity to do it, they're going to try and sneak it in anyway. And that's when it starts to get kind of in the way most of the time. So give them a time to do it. Right. The other way that I've always thought would be really entertaining is to have a couple little, get your little nephews and your little, 10-year-olds in the back, give them an earpiece and give them a pair of sunglasses and just start barking at people. Just be like, put your phone away. If you don't put it away, put it in the bucket, right? Like, have a bucket in the back that just collects everybody's cell phones. That's probably not going to work. But anyway, I always thought that would be kind of funny to have, little 10-year-olds in the back trying to steal everybody's electronics. So the unplugged ceremony is a big thing. And we've actually seen instances, and there's photographer rants on the internet all over the world that have had people cut you off, right? So these people are lined up down the aisle and they're taking a video or a photo of the bride as she's walking down, and the groom, who hasn't seen her yet today, is physically having to move and shift out of the way, and it's ruining his view of the whole thing, the photos of the whole thing, right? Like, it can get
it's not your day, put it away.
It can get catty pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
So here's my theory on this thing. Number one, stay out of the aisle, right? Like, if you can.
Yeah, that's the number one rule of a wedding. Do not go into the aisle.
Right.
Ever.
You as a bride, here's how you can combat this as a bride. Make your aisle twice as wide, right? So even if it's a lot wider, even if they're coming out of the sides with their cell phones, they're not going to be impeding upon what I can see. I can slide out and get in the middle of that a little further, and I can get everything I need to. But if the aisle is super narrow and that one person or even worse, one person on either side comes together and they kind of try to do that shot as they go, then you're in trouble, right? Then I'm going to miss that whole thing as it happens. So if you're going to do it if you want to do the unplugged ceremony thing, or if you're worried about people taking photos, it's always kind of funny as we walk into a ceremony, because I can see exactly, like, I walk in and I do a check down the aisle to see if there's anybody sitting there with a cell phone out already, or like if the person that brought their own camera is going to sit there. So I'm always okay. Well, so I'm pre-thinking about this, like, okay, I got to make sure I can stay out of that person's way or get out of that scenario there. Unplugged ceremonies are great for photos if you can do it. But here's maybe a hot take that I feel like could be anti-unplugged ceremony. This all stems from an instance that happened, and I think we might have talked about this a couple of times ago.
I think we did give some.
But there was an incident I think it was in North Dakota. There was a wedding photography and videography outfit that was just a factory. These guys had, 20 or 30 weddings a weekend, and they were shipping photographers out to all these different places. Anyway, the issue became one day they just straight up closed their doors and they ran away. So the people that had their photos just taken didn't get access to their photos. The people that were on the books for this next weekend didn't have a photographer ready to go shoot their wedding, right? And whoa, right? Like we put all this faith in the professional, right? So yes, our job is to be there. Our job is to catch all these things, but who knows what happens, right? What happens if our SD card blows up in our camera? It doesn't blow up, but what if it did? Like, what if it didn't work, right? Like, what if it stopped working?
Yeah.
What if on the way home I get in a car wreck and my car, explodes and God,
maybe let's get off the explode, but maybe the camera falls out of the window or something.
The camera's broken or whatever. Like we put all this faith in the professional thing as we go. And if you have taken the ability for everybody else around the venue to take photos of your ceremony or of your wedding itself, you might not have anything if that were to happen, right? This thing in North Dakota ended up being it ended up in the Supreme Court of North Dakota. Yeah. It was a big deal. I don't know the answer as to whether they ended up getting their images back on some of that kind of stuff, but it changed my perspective on, man, we put a lot of faith in these professionals, and that's great. I appreciate that faith, but hedge your bets a little, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe as a professional, maybe soften my view on, God, you guys got to get all these cameras out of my face or out of this way because I'm trying to do a job. And yes, that's part of it, but just, if you've hedged your bets, if you've got more photos from other places, then that might not be a bad thing, right? So unplugged ceremonies, I like them. I think it keeps people present. It keeps people out of the way of us trying to do our job throughout the most of it. But if people get their phones out, like, it's not that big a deal. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right. And hopefully it doesn't turn into the fact that those are the only photos that you end up getting.
But I mean, even like you could do partial, like adding that, have everyone take their phone out, take a couple photos is a great option. Another one, maybe just go and tell the people that are sitting on the aisles, hey, we have other people here. We have other people taking photos. People on your aisle down there are taking photos. Please just avoid the aisle and we'll be good. Sure. Like, as long as they're not in the aisle, truly, that is the only place that it matters.
Right. The rest of it, I can work around, and we can go from whatever we need to there. Usually the officiant is the one making an announcement. So the officiant's going to say, hey, make sure you put your cell phones away, turn them off now. Let's go, and off we go. So, I don't know. Unplugged ceremonies are awesome, but don't feel like you have to. Just if from your photographer's perspective, if you can defend the aisle, then everything else is good.
Sweet.
Okay, so let's talk about another thing that is on a photographer's mind is, do I have another person there with me? Do I have a second shooter with me? There are times in the wedding day that makes a lot of sense, and there's other times where having a second person around isn't that big a deal, right? So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, really, there's only like 2 parts of the day that it's great to have a second shooter, and a lot of it does depend on whether or not you guys are seeing each other before the ceremony. If you're not, I'd say the most important time to have a second shooter is during that ceremony, the first time you're seeing her walk down the aisle. Obviously, if you have just one photographer, they're trying to do both at the same time and kind of turning back and forth.
Jenna looks really funny at the front of the wedding when she's like running back and forth, going, this person, okay, now that person. If you have one photographer, here's a pro tip: if you have one photographer and you have not seen your groom yet, walk as slow as you can down the aisle.
Yes.
Slow down so that we have enough time to get his reaction and your time, so we can go back and forth. Don't be on a mission to get to the end of the aisle.
Yeah.
And give me one shot at each of you, and maybe I screwed something up or whatever.
Yeah. No, so that's definitely a great one. If you're wanting a second shooter, if your photographer offers a second shooter edition, that would be a great time to have them.
It's great also when you have big weddings, when there's like a lot of logistics involved, right? Maybe you're getting ready at 2 different locations and you want coverage of that. Maybe you have 10 bridesmaids on each side, 10 bridesmaids, 10 groomsmen, right? And there's just a logistical component of trying to organize that many people.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor. Don't have 10 people in your wedding party. That's crazy. That's excessive.
We get it. You have a lot of friends. Yeah. Congrats.
You're popular. Awesome. anyway, it's funny. Here we are 13 years down the road. And it's funny how, in the moment, the people that are in your wedding at the beginning, are a big part of your life at that point of your life. But I will tell you this, not everybody that's in your wedding will stay in your life as heavily throughout.
Yeah. So,
anyway, I don't know. That's kind of a downer thing to talk about.
That is really a downer, but
yeah,
that's probably true.
But life moves on, and people move on, and
how many friends do you have for 20 years? Probably only a handful.
Not 10, I'll tell you that much. Don't put somebody in your damn wedding. Here we go. Okay. Sorry.
Back to second shooters.
Sorry, friends. We love you.
The other awesome part about having a second shooter is you get more of kind of the behind the scenes. Like you get the people talking, you get the candids, you get what's happening that you're not seeing. Because if you have just the one photographer, for the most part, they're going to be following you around the bridal party, the family, and getting a lot of that focus. But there's also a lot of other things happening that you're not seeing. There's grandkids. There's not your grandkids, but there's little kids.
there's connections. There's groups of people that are around. There's activities that are happening. Yes, when we bring two photographers to a wedding, usually one of them, I just say, okay, you're locked into the couple. Whatever they're doing, we're doing. Right? We're taking pictures of. Because there's a lot of pieces to that. Right? There's okay, now we're cutting the cake. Okay, now we're doing toast. Now we're doing there's always some sort of action happening, and so there needs to be somebody kind of catching a good chunk of that. But yes, while your bridesmaid is giving her speech, or maybe your sister's up there giving her toast, and mom's in the back losing her biscuits because she's just crying and so excited and so emotional. Like being able to capture both of those parts of the process is important, right?
Yeah.
So not for everybody, not for every circumstance, but there are times where second shooters could be a really big help, logistically and just from a quality of product perspective.
Yeah, quality and quantity. You're going to get a lot more of the candid style.
Yep.
If you have that extra person to grab those extra moments. All right, anyway, back to our golden hour.
Golden hour is a big thing for photographers.
Yes. If you don't like golden hour, you're not my friend.
We judge couples on basically how much time they give us to shoot photos at the end of the night. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. But
not true.
We think, and one of the things that we love to do are these golden hour portraits, because we think that these are the bangers, right? These are the ones that are going to be, that you're going to hang in your walls. These are going to be the ones that like you see in a gallery the next day and you're going to go, whoa, right?
Yeah.
It takes some logistics to put all that kind of stuff together, right? And it takes a know-how on how to manipulate the lighting and all that kind of stuff too. But the biggest part of this is understanding where that happens in your timeline and being ready for it, right? And we talked about this earlier in the podcast, talking about how Montana has such a weird, stretch of, in the beginning of the year, our sunsets are super late, so that changes when that happens throughout the process. And then, as you get into October, November, December, there's this real dance when you get to the fall of how many things can you get in before you disappear to go do these photos, right? In June, no big deal, right? The whole party is pretty much done. You've got people leaving by the time you're running out to go get the sunset photos, right? Because it doesn't happen until 9:30, almost 10 o'clock. In September or October, when the sunset happens at 7 o'clock, right? Like you have to make some decisions, or we have to kind of split this thing up. One of my biggest fears, one of the biggest things that we feel as a photographer is taking you away from your action, taking you away from things that are happening at your reception, right? What I always tell people is we have to have the dance floor open before you disappear, right? So if you were taking off to go do these sunset photos and people don't have something to do without you, you're going to lose people. It's going to be, everybody's just going to be sitting around staring like, what the heck? They're all going to come at us later. Like, dude, when are you going to give these people back to us? When can we like hang out with our friends? Right.
Yeah.
But so planning this around, whatever your time frame is, whatever you pick up if you're getting married in the fall, you got to do some dances around that. If you're getting married in the summertime or in the spring, when the sunset happens at different times, it's a logistic, right?
Yeah. And if it's important to you, it should be. But put it into your schedule and block out that time. Maybe even 10 to 15 minutes is all. Obviously, your photographers would love to have more time than that. But if you're just trying to get a couple photos at that time, great. Schedule it in and defend it. If you know that the sunset is getting close, don't start another toast.
Right.
Don't start a certain dance. Like, just wait on some of those things to go do that. Start the dance floor, get your party going, and people are not going to notice if you're gone for 10 minutes. Yeah, truly.
If you get the dance floor open and if people have something to do, you could disappear for a half hour. Nobody even knows you're gone. Right? Yeah. Like, no big deal. We're not trying to keep you away from your people all the way. But if these golden hour portraits are what you're after, understand a couple things. Number one, the best part of the sunset doesn't happen right as the sun goes down.
Yeah. You look at your sunset time, and if it says 7:30, you're not going to get those epic photos until almost 8.
Yeah, 7:45 is when it starts to get really cool, and then you spend 7:45 to whatever. But the crazy part about this is it all depends on the weather, it depends on the location. I mean, there's all sorts of variable factors to this thing. But if you want, I mean, we've had the one that will live in my mind forever. It was last year. We shot out here at the fairgrounds, and we had this just epic sunset. We got to the point with the sunset photos. Like I ran out of options. Like I ran out of ideas.
Yeah,
and the sunset was
the most beautiful sunset
still going
ever seen, ever. It was gorgeous.
Yeah,
and it lasted forever.
And I went through my normal rhythm because we are used to only getting 10 or 15 minutes to do this. And so I was like, okay, here we go. And we did the thing, and then I was like, oh, but wait, there's still more. Oh gosh.
And it kept getting better.
It was just incredible, right? And those were, images that I know that they enjoyed. They printed those, they have them on their walls. It's, so.
Mm-hmm. Stick it out. If your photographer starts to get those happy feet, like they know it's coming, because for the most part, we can kind of tell when the sunset's really going to go off. Wait it out. It's worth it.
We have a term for this. We call it a lightgasm.
Yes.
It's when your photographer gets really giddy and really going, here it comes, right? And
people probably think we're weird.
They know
they're not wrong,
for sure. But it's also like when you start to see your photographer get really giddy and really excited about what's happening, you know that what you're getting is top quality there. So anyway, have fun with it. If it's important to you, again, moral of the story on all of this stuff. If it's important to you, put some time in for it. If it's not, move on, right?
Yep.
Don't worry about it.
Yep.
So.
And if you're still worried about those golden hours photos, do the day after thing we talked about.
For sure. Yeah. That I'm excited about that.
I am so stoked for that.
Because it's going to just take the pressure off of the thing.
Yeah.
Here's what always happens. The day before the wedding, awesome sunset. The day of the wedding, shitty sunset. The day after the wedding, awesome sunset, right? Like
yes.
So that's just how it works, right? The day you need it to happen is never the day that it's going to happen. And there's probably ways that we can scientifically discover,
what day is going to have the perfect,
what scenario gets us the best imagery. But anyway, hedge your bets a little bit.
Well, and the other fun part about that, and I know we've touched on this, but I want to go back because a lot of the times, like the coolest spots to take your sunset photos aren't the ones that are a 2-step walk from your venue.
That's a great point.
Specifically with the venue I chose and several of the other venues that we shoot at, you kind of have to go on a little walk or a little drive to get to those amazing landscape views. Mm-hmm. And doing it the next day gives you that flexibility. You have more time to get there. It's just,
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a couple of, I'm thinking of a couple venues in my head right now that there was one on the other side of the state that we shoot at that one of the most epic photos I think I've ever seen was taken on top of the mountain. So they're down in the bottom of this valley and they drove up this hill to get to the top, which takes 20, 25 minutes one way. Okay, so do the math on that. So 20, 25 minutes one way equals 20, 25 minutes back. So that's almost an hour. That's not even including the shooting time up there or the hanging out time waiting for the sunset to do something cool, right? So
if you want the awesome landscapes, if you want the awesome couples photos, doing your couples sunset photos on a different night gives you a ton of flexibility. Your photographer's stoked. You're going to end up with way better images because you're not worried the whole time like, oh, we're taking too long. We should get headed back and miss out on the cool sunset. So
anyway,
it's a cool option.
Yeah,
try it out.
Sunsets are a big part of what we do, and they're the photos that I go back and judge a season on. It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, check out this photo. This was cool.
Yeah, and it gives your photographer a whole new headspace for creativity because at the end of the night, they've been shooting your photos for 10 hours.
Right.
They're tired. You're tired. Yes, they have their creativity still and are excited about it, but they're going to be able to come up with a lot more epic photos when given a nap.
Right. Yeah. Or given a time, and given the time to come in with an idea, or having the time to set up equipment that we would use or need for all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am grateful for however many minutes you'll give us at the wedding itself.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes where it's logistically, I'm just not going to have the ability to do all the things that I want to do in my head.
Mm-hmm. Especially in those like later season weddings, June weddings, you're going to be totally fine getting all those photos done on your wedding day. But if you're getting married September, October, November, December, those are the times where that would probably come more into play, where it'd be a better option. So at least for us, our biggest consideration was the places that we wanted to get to. Number one, were a good 30-minute drive up the mountain. And number two, all of our family's there.
Right.
We only get so much time with them, and sunsets at 7:00. Right. Like, that's a huge piece of...
That'd be an hour and a half of time to go up to the top of the hill and do
and then
all
everyone, all your guests get hungry and they want their dinner, and
Yeah, and they blame the photographer for commandeering the day and making it into a big photo shoot, which, again, we talked about that earlier. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Okay, last one.
Yep, last one.
Promise. This one is a big hitter, and it goes both ways. I get it. But from a photographer's perspective, if we planned your wedding, do the first look.
Yes.
Every time.
Yes.
Number one, private moment. You get time with your spouse. It's also a great way to do more personal vows. I am not a public speaker. I do not want to share my deepest, darkest, not secrets, but feelings, emotions in front of a bunch of people. And a lot of people are like that. My fiance could care less about doing those in front of people. Do the private vows during your first look. You get the emotion, you get that private time, you get those feelings said, and you don't have to worry about a bunch of people watching you.
Yes. So I did it the other way when I got married 12 years ago. I wished I would have had some time to do that, right? There's power and there's a beauty in the whole waiting for her to come down the aisle thing. And if you go back and listen to our wedding traditions podcast about why you traditionally waited, you'll maybe rethink this a little bit. But the idea of just having some time and having to be able to be, just one-on-one with that person really sets the stage and really sets the bound, or what's the word?
Like, it grounds you for the day. It
sure.
gets you kind of back into the realizing, like, this is what we're here for. These are the important moments, because up until that point, you've been probably drinking, hanging out with your friends, having a good time, partying.
The week of the wedding is just a logistical run around, right? Trying to get all the things organized and get all the people to the right places. And it's just like, it's just been this week long, just holy smokes. It's a party, right? It's a crazy, just trying to get everything organized. This is the first time that you're ready, you're going,
you're there. There's no more planning.
Yeah. It's already, all the balls are rolling. It's just you and him, or you and her. Right.
Yep.
And
another way, I mean, we've seen this done too, and this is also another great option. If you are dead set on not seeing each other beforehand, still do this, but just do it without seeing each other. Reach around a door, reach around a tree, back to back, whatever it is. Without seeing each other, it's still possible to do private vows. It's still possible to have that moment to center yourself. Just like standing in the presence of one another on that day is huge.
I remember a bride that we just shot this last fall, where she was out in a field, and we literally had a couple bridesmaids holding up a blanket that protected her from him walking in. We had him backpedal for like damn near 100 yards. I felt horrible for him, but whatever. He was a trooper. So he walked over to where she was. She was protected by this blanket. They had two bridesmaids that were kind of guiding him so he didn't fall in a gopher hole or whatever, and literally got them back to back, right? Mm-hmm. And so they had this moment, and we were doing some video for them that day, and that was the best audio throughout the entire thing, right? It was
so emotional.
They were so emotional. They were having, they had that moment. They were holding each other's hands. They were doing the whole thing. They never saw each other, right? So they had the moment, but they didn't do the whole, like, I saw her then thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is important to some people. And if that's important to you, that's great. there are lots of ways to do this. I love that idea of, you don't have to physically see each other. We've done a lot of these cool, like hold hands around the door. I'm thinking of a wedding that I shot. Gosh, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago. They did it around one of the folding walls in the bottom of the church. They have the little the walls that make the different room or whatever. One was on one side, one was on the other side, and they held hands. They didn't even speak to each other. They just read the vows that they had written for each other to themselves, and they just like literally it was this quiet space that they were holding hands, and then they both just started losing it. Right, I can still see the photo in my mind. Such a powerful moment, such an awesome experience, such a big way to celebrate what this is. One of the big things that I think people get nervous for with the first look is that they lose the power of the actual moment. And I will argue that to my death.
Yes.
Does not happen, right? Like there is still power in the moment that she's walking down the aisle. We've seen so many couples, so many grooms that maybe didn't cry or didn't have any emotions or, didn't have any outward emotions when they did the first look, totally lose it when she's walking down the aisle, or even better, both, right? Like having those emotions when you get to see her and when you get to talk to her, and then going, okay, well, I think didn't lose them all. Yep. They're all right there. Oh gosh, here she comes. Right. It's so don't feel like you're going to lose that if you don't do it. Yeah,
exactly. And the funnier part is a lot of these times, like you look at the guy and you're like, he's not going to cry. He's too tough and blah, 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 blah. Those are the ones that bawl the most, and it's the best.
Some real tough guys lose some real emotions. Yeah.
Yep. But also the other thing is we hear this a lot from everyone saying like, oh, he better cry. He better cry. Just because he doesn't cry doesn't mean he doesn't have the emotion.
Right.
So don't make such a big deal over that. We've literally had brides come back to us upset because they didn't get photos of their groom crying. Number one, their groom didn't cry.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a big deal. That just isn't who he is. Maybe he's not a crier. Some people just aren't. So don't make that.
And some people it sneaks up on. Some people, we always kind of make a joke out of it before the wedding. Like, okay, what's the bet? Is he crying or is he not? And everybody's joking around, but then, then it happens, or then it doesn't. Like, oh no, this guy's never gonna cry. Oh yeah, this guy's a wimp. He's gonna do it, and you just never know, right? But that doesn't mean just because there's outward emotions on these things doesn't mean that there's, a lack of emotion.
Exactly. So. And I think you don't have to be perfect. Your wedding does not have to be a Pinterest board wedding, and I think that is just like a huge part of like in the planning. A lot of, I'll say girls, but it doesn't. Not always, I guess. They're looking at the Pinterest boards. They're seeing the photos. They're coming up with all these ideas of the images that they want. And a lot of it is the emotional ones. It is, and those are the important photos. Those are meaningful. But you can't compare yourself to that because that's not you're not that couple.
You can't curate that. Right?
Yeah, like exactly.
You can't just organize and build that. That's just a byproduct of what this whole thing becomes. And there's always a lot of emotions on a wedding day. This is a big day. This is a big part of the journey of a couple, and it hits all sorts of fronts. It's not just the bride and the groom, it's the family members, it's the mom and dad. I think about this more, now as a mom and dad, having a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son that I'm going to have to, go through this process with here at some point. Let the emotion be what the emotion is. Set the table for all of the cool things that you want to have included, and then let it roll, man. So anyway, hopefully you got some information out of this. Again, if your photographer chose or planned your wedding for you, we would attack a couple of different things, and feel free to hit us up with some questions or drop us some comments on any of this stuff. We've got all sorts of great ideas for things coming down the road here. We're going to get some more vendors involved. This next week, we're actually going to interview a venue.
A DJ and a event planner / day of coordinator. So they're going to have lots of really great tips, especially, wedding planning side. That's what we're doing here. So she's going to have a lot of great information on that.
So stay tuned. Tell your friends. Share us, like us, do all the things. Okay, well.
All right. See you. Bye.
See ya. Cue the song.
Cue our generic music.
I totally took a video of the radio the other day because the guy was doing the news at the radio and he had this song playing in the background. Proud of us.
Yeah. We're cool like that.
We're so creative.
One day we'll come up with a cool one. It's fine.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Want your questions answered on the podcast? Are you newly married or engaged, or are you a wedding vendor wanting to be a guest on the show? Want weekly tips and insights sent right to your inbox? Send us a message at www.floatingleafstudios.com/2togspodcast.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.